lesson with you all, and what I'm going to do in a moment, okay, I had to do a click there. What I'm going to do in just a moment is I'm going to go to sharing my screen with the PowerPoint that I prepared for you all. And so the first thing I want to do is tell you a couple things. Obviously, we're not at class today, so this is a video lesson. We're going to do a longer whiteboard session next week so that we can review the things from this week, as well as what we would have reviewed from the last few weeks and things. So since we're dissecting the frog, and that is strictly our plan for next week, there will be enough time to have a good amount to review. And I want to keep you guys reviewing the past materials that we have. And so also then you would turn in your homework. I noticed that several of you did not do the practice assessment that I put on Haiku for you. You know who you are. I need you to go do that, okay? I want all your work done. I also want all your worksheets handed in. So if you didn't hand in the first one, and some of you didn't, I want that next week. It's going to be hard to pass the class if you don't do this work. And I'm serious about that. I also gave the assignment of the 10 essential facts about fish. And I'm doing these things with articles and videos and things so as to broaden and make more interesting all the things that we're doing. The things with animal taxonomy, there's just fascinating biology. I didn't waste any time, even though I was home today, because I was watching videos and things myself. It was fun. It was a lot of fun, actually. I watched different things about the different salamanders, the mud puppies, axolotls. We'll talk about those in a little bit. So there will be a practice assessment for this module when the page posts, as you'll see it post, and there will be a further exploration assignment, and it is on Michigan wildlife. It is the Michigan salamanders and mud puppies, and so some of them are poisonous. There's interesting features about them. But so you'll see in a content block on the Haiku page called Further Exploration, there's an article. It has short reads. They won't take, they're less than 5 minutes or so to read, but they give a lot of essential facts about the individual species of the mud puppies and the salamanders. And so we'll talk about that. I'm also going to post a couple videos in relation to the things that we're talking about this week. And so right now I'm going to share my screen, and I am going to my PowerPoint for today. And so kind of our goal is to talk through the PowerPoint. And so I don't know how long we'll be together here, but hopefully you'll listen to this and then supplement it with your book. Okay, so we're talking about amphibians, and it is just the 2 pages in your book, pages 42 and 43. And as you can see from the first slide here, the amphibian, the word comes from the word amphi, means both, and bio means life. And so the amphibians are a very different, a very interesting link in the whole the whole vertebrate classes that we're studying this semester, because the simpler animals, and then we studied the fish first, they were almost with no exceptions, they had to live in water, or in general, they would have to live in water because they would get their oxygen from it. They didn't have lungs, and so water oxygen extraction came from water. The only exception to that is, as we all know, is the insects. But insects can't go very long without water, because their bodies have water in them. And so the amphibians are very interesting because they live in the water as larvae, but then they live on land as adults. And so we'll talk more about that in the life cycle of the frog, how it changes, and how it's adapted first for the water and then for the land. The things about about amphibians is that they do not have scales, and they lack claws, and they lack scales, and so their skin is slimy. It's very slimy, and part of that sliminess enables them to hold water the best that they can, but they still have to live either on or near water, even as they get to adulthood. And so I'm going to go to the next one here. There you go. Why didn't it go to the next one? There it did. Okay, so amphibian facts. On page 42 in your text, you have a bunch of points about amphibian facts. And so as you go through this, as you're listening to this, you should have your text. The amphibians are a small group of vertebrates. There are about 4,000 species. They are cold-blooded. And remember, we use the more accurate term, and we called it ectothermic. And that means that their body temperature is regulated by the outside of them. Like ecto is outside and therm refers to heat. And so as some of you guys are learning Latin, I know some of you are learning Latin, a lot of Latin roots are a part of our language. And so you will understand things from that vantage point. And you'll continue to see that with our taxonomy classes and things. And so, as we said before, smooth, they have moist skin, no fur, feathers, or scales, and this makes them depend on the water. They can breathe through their skin. And one of the really interesting things about the frog in particular, when we dissect the frog next week, we'll cut into him, and we'll be able to take his outer skin off. And what you'll see is a really big network of venation, of arteries and veins at the surface of the skin. And that is so that they can extract oxygen from the water and take it directly into their bloodstream. And so they're created with a real efficiency that way. They lay eggs that don't have a shell, so they have to be laid in water. They don't have protection from the elements at all. And so it has to be not necessarily water. It can be really close to water, but it has to be a really moist environment. And so the young ones, as we said, they breathe with gills, but the adults breathe with lungs. There's a few that don't perfectly fit into that, and we'll talk about those in a minute. There's 3 orders. The order Anura, so this is the phylum Vertebrata, the class Amphibia, and the order Anura. Anura is frogs and toads. The order Caudata is salamanders and newts, and the order Gymnophiona is the caecilians, and those are the ones that don't have any legs. They kind of look like worms. So frog and toad, so frog versus toad. Again, I'm using your textbook, page 42. You see with the frog is very athletic. They have really moist skin. They have long legs. Their back legs are really long for jumping. They're a nice bright color, and so they will blend into bright colored leaves, the grass. Their movement is hopping, and they point out that they have a pointy nose. Now, there's a lot of frogs, like the leopard frog has black spots on him, and that is a camouflage kind of a thing. I looked at some things on the internet, and I may post one video about poison frogs, which they're the ones that are the super bright colors. And remember, in nature, when you have a really bright colored animal, that's like a warning sign. That's usually something that would tell you, stay away from me. And so it's protective coloration, but it's defensive as well. And so the poison frogs are gorgeous colors, but don't touch them. So the toad, on the other hand, is gray, brown, black. They have a squatty, chubby body shape. They have a broad face and bumpy skin. They kind of crawl when they move. And so toads don't have to be by the water their whole life, unlike frogs. They have kind of a thicker, kind of bumpier skin. And so they can live they can live in places like along tree lines where there's moisture and things, areas that won't get dried out. I had the cutest little toad in my garden last year, and he was just in this little hole, and I posted a picture. I said, he's a member of my garden community. But he was really cute. But anyways, the toads are really helpful in a garden because they'll eat bugs. And so I was glad that he was living there. When you hold toads and frogs, a lot of times they can have a mild toxin in their skin, and it'll kind of be secreted on you. And one of the things that you can experience is it can be a little bit make it burn a little bit or sting just a little bit. And it's a mild toxin. It certainly is not going to kill you or anything, but it will but it's a deterrent. You know, it will make you want to put it down. So frogs versus toads. And so just going to move on. I'm going to go to salamanders and newts. Now this is the second class. The class Anura was frogs and toads. The class Caudata is salamanders and newts. And so you can see if we make this better. Okay. Our further exploration assignment is on salamanders today, but on page 42 you have some information regarding salamanders, and essentially the difference between salamanders and frogs and toads is salamanders don't lose their tails when they grow, so they are kind of this you know, clawless, scaleless, slimy little animal, and some of them are kind of cute. They do breathe with gills as lungs, breathe with gills as young and with lungs when they mature. There are some species though that never lose their gills and they stay in the water. So we'll talk about them a little bit. Newts are a little bit different. They're included in this group. They are ones that stay closer, they stay in the water more. And so this was a little bit of a tough group. I was studying a lot of the information and trying to make generalizations, but there are a number of exceptions based on the habitat and lifestyle of the individual, the individual species that you're looking at. On your page 42, there's a little bit of information about the hellbender salamander. And he's longer, he's almost 2.5 feet long. He lives a very long life. He can live, like it says on your page, 55 years. They lay a lot of eggs, and so that helps them to proliferate their species. But the hellbender is not in Michigan. There are a number of species in Michigan, but the hellbender was more like Missouri and Arkansas. But they do get big. They were not really poisonous. A lot of ways, the information that I read, any of the salamanders, they kind of say, don't really hold them a lot, don't really pick them up a lot. It's going to kind of damage them. It's going to make it harder for them to live longer. But the hellbender is one of the big ones. They have you can see the gill slits on the little drawing of the hellbender on this page there. And one of the features of the salamanders is a broad, flat head and kind of a flat body. They hide under rocks and in moist places. And like they mentioned, the hellbender, that he would have the same territory, the same place of living, like for his whole life of 50 years or whatever it is. And so it's a very, very interesting animals. So I want to talk about the mud puppy. I did a little bit of research on him, and the mud puppy is, there's mud puppies in Michigan, kind of a bunch. And so on this slide, they were called water dogs. They're the only, one of only a few salamanders that make a noise. And so they get their name because they make an interesting noise. It's almost like a bark or a squeal. I think I'm going to post up a video of it. I found some yesterday, and I want to stick one on your page. But the thing about the mud puppies is you can see on the side of his head, it looks like he's got like a tuft or like a plume, and those are external gills. They maintain these external gills as adults, and so they really never change into a terrestrial form of a salamander. And so the gills are a rich color, and it's because there is a lot of arteries and just a blood source to draw oxygen in right at the surface. It says that they can gulp air because they have lungs, but most of them, some of them are 100% aquatic, so they're not really using their lungs. And they can absorb some oxygen through their skin. Now, I have an article that is linked on your page, and it actually is very interesting. A study from the Michigan State University Extension Service. And this is called the misunderstood mud puppies. Sometimes people think mud puppies are fish, but they are actually amphibians, and they have lungs, they can gulp air, and they rely on these gills on the surface of their bodies. Now, if you take them out of the water, one of the videos I had, I was looking at, when you take them out of the water, they quickly flatten the gills against their body, almost like so you can't really see them, but they're not really using them, and they're protecting them that way. So it is very interesting. The mud puppy is Michigan's largest fully aquatic salamander. And there was some very interesting things about this little guy that basically helps all the natural the species around it. They are referred to as a bioindicator because they are sensitive to pollutants in the water quality, and so they'll act like an early warning system for environmental problems. Unfortunately, they are sensitive to, I think that there are chemicals and things that they use to keep the lamprey numbers down. And so remember, we talked about how the lamprey is parasitic to the fishing industry, to the different fish. And so the fishing industry in Michigan kind of keeps the lamprey number down. And so the things they use for that, apparently that is pretty hard on the mud puppies. So partly they call them mud puppies because they live in water, but they also live in really muddy areas. And so I think that there is enough moisture in some of the muddy areas where they're still able to extract oxygen from the mud. Apparently, when in the fall, when there's a lot of angler fishing going on, these little guys are caught by the angler fishermen, and they'll just, if it's the winter, oh, they're ice fishing, they'll just toss them on the ice and they think that they're fine. Unfortunately, these guys will die if you do that. And so they tell the anglers, they say, don't, be careful when you're fishing for them, because if you catch them, because they will, they're kind of an endangered species, and they are good for the environment in a lot of ways. They don't really harm anything. So they ask him to kind of try to, get your hook out of his mouth easily and get him back in the water. Don't just throw him on the ice. The mud puppies are actually pretty good with regard to their diet. They do eat small fish, including the invasive species of the gobies, and so you don't want a lot of gobies in the population. So they don't impact the regular fish population. So they're not like a lamprey, like someone damage or animals that are damaging the fish population, but they help kind of control some of the negative species. So the Michigan Department of Natural Resources did make a season that that is closed from catching mud puppies during the winter, and that's when anglers catch them. And so that's to help them remember that this is an endangered species, and it's really not good to catch them, especially in the winter. Some people think they're blind. They're actually not blind, but they don't really need a lot of eyesight because they're moving around in mud and stuff like that. But they have their eyesight is limited, but they have a really keen sense of smell. So they're able to, operate effectively with that sense so that they can catch food. So some animals, some amphibians just lay their eggs and then they leave, and doesn't matter if predators eat them or what happens. But the mud puppy is one that will protect the eggs when they hatch and then also guard them while they're young. And so they're quite protective mothers. One of the things about the mud puppies in Michigan is they are not poisonous. There were a number of species that had toxins associated with them, and so I'll talk about those in a minute. It's interesting, the mud puppies can live for more than 20 years. It can take them 10 years actually to reach their sexual maturity and then reproduce, but they can live for 20 years. And their gestation of their young is about 1 to 2 months. And there is, with animals, there is a variation in their gestation period. And so that's because of the weather conditions. I hope I didn't lose you guys because my internet did something strange for a second here. Okay, so we want to talk about caecilians for a minute or two here. They are the legless amphibians, and they look like worms. They look like worms, but they are slimy and they have a backbone. So they're not a snake. They don't have scales. And they're not a worm because they have a backbone. Their name, cacus, is another Latin root, and that is a word for blind. And so some of the species don't have eyes. They have just like a little bump in place of their eyes. They do have a pointy skull because their lifestyle is burrowing underground. Some live their entire lives in water. They don't have ears, but they have sensory organs, and that enables them to pick up a vibration so that they can, particularly so that they can hunt. These guys have little tiny tentacles, and you can't really see them. I had another picture. You have this this pink and dark colored one on your picture, but I had one that had a little bump off the front of his face. It's like a tentacle, and it is a sensory thing to help them find food and help them find their way around. I could only put one picture, so I didn't put that other one. Okay, I'm going to go back for a second. Going to go all the way back to the salamanders here, and I want to talk about, I don't have a picture. There is a picture front and center on your haiku page. I apologize, I would have put a picture on this PowerPoint, but the one salamander he's kind of whitish, and he has pink or red on his gills. And so just like this mud puppy here, the gills are external, and the mud puppy is the axolotl salamander is just a cute little guy. My goodness, he's cute. But the axolotl has a kind of an interesting things about his life. He's named after the Aztec god of fire and lightning, and that god is called Xolotl. And the legend says that Xolotl disguised himself as a salamander so he wouldn't have to be sacrificed. And the one god of the Aztecs was like a sun god, and basically he was kind of still like in one place, and he didn't have any food, and so apparently the other gods had to sacrifice themselves to him, and so Xolotl didn't want to do that. And so he turned into an amphibian to get away. Well, those are legends, but those Aztec gods really were they demanded human sacrifice. And as an aside, obviously this is a little Catholic plug here, but Our Lady of Guadalupe, when she when she appeared to little Juan Diego in Guadalupe, she said, you know, I want a shrine built to me. And I know that this doesn't seem like it pertains, but it actually does. The Aztec gods were such terrible pagan gods that there were lots and people sacrificed their children to these Aztec gods. And so this was a lost, broken people, just lost in witchcraft and pagan gods. And so that's one of the things that the conversion to Catholicism that was so massive in that time frame saved people from saved children from the human sacrifice to these gods. But so these Aztec gods are the source around this little axolotl guy. One of the things that's super nifty about the axolotl, and he's studied by a lot of scientists, is that he has the ability to regenerate any of his limbs. He can even regenerate part of his brain. And so remember, we studied that with the lower organisms, that they could regenerate body parts, like the starfish could regenerate a limb, you know, or as you went to a little bit higher animals, they could regenerate parts of limbs. And so even with people, if you have a little baby, and let's say he gets a part of his finger cut off or something like that, really young, immature, little kids like that, they kind of regenerate a little bit, but this is kind of like say a part of a finger or something like that. But so that is something that makes the axolotl just very, very interesting. And they study him to understand why his regeneration as a higher animal, as a vertebrate animal, is so effective. The axolotl does have lungs, but he can breathe through his skin. One of the things that makes him really cute is he has this upturned little kind of he looks like he's always smiling a little bit. So he is posted, right, like I said, front and center on your page. I do apologize that I didn't stick a picture of him on this PowerPoint, but his regeneration even includes like his heart, brain, and spinal cord. And so it is just really, really fascinating. I have to try to look out for the salamanders because limbs like the axolotls that are so. And so that affects the numbers of the species. And so I looked at a couple, one other thing with regard to amphibian size. And so I'm going to kind of divert to that just for a second. Amphibians, one of the things about them with regard to the information that I was reading, it included that amphibians never had an evolutionary advantage to like learning to stand upright or anything like that. And so their size was kind of limited by that. But what they have is amphibians can grow all the way through their life, and that's called indeterminate growth. And so in terms of their, if their habitat is really good, if their food sources are really good, if there aren't many predators, that's going to give them a lot of advantages. And so in spaces like that, that would enable them to grow the most, where a lot of times there'll be limits on any of those things. But the largest amphibians, as I said, have few predators. And if they grow large, their metabolism is lower, and so they can manage their body temperature and things and their hydration better. But then you have the thing where they need more food, and so that kind of gets in the way. But as they increase in size, they have to, if they increase in weight and size faster than their strength, then they would kind of outrun their strength, and so that would make them stop growing. But some amphibians are, the littlest ones are only like 7 millimeters long, and so that is extremely small. If you get up to like the Goliath frog, that's 33 centimeters. And so if you get up to like the hellbender salamander, he can be like oh, I don't know, 70 centimeters or so. So there was one prehistoric amphibian that was actually 9 meters long. He was the level of like an alligator or a crocodile. And so so a lot of size issues with these guys. But that little guy is extinct. So the life cycle of the frog, I think that the frog is one that, as a common animal, is one that we're kind of the most familiar with. We've probably seen little tadpoles, but so there's 5 phases. The egg phase, you can see on obviously I picked a cartoon picture here, but the female lays eggs and the male fertilizes them externally by spreading the sperm over just in the water over the eggs, and they get fertilized. And the tadpole phase is a little swimming guy. Slowly he has like a long tail, and slowly that changes to legs. His body form changes. All the while, when he is a tadpole, he's obviously breathing through gills. And when he grows legs, they call him a little froglet. And then slowly his body changes to where he loses the tail completely and becomes an adult. And so this is on your page 43, just a little picture. There are some other facts on page 43. The amphibian eggs are really sticky, and so the stickiness helps them to stay moist. They can't dry out, or else they would die right away. We had a situation. You can really affect the local habitat. We had a situation. My family had a pool at our last house in Ohio, and because we lived near our woods, we would get tree frogs, and we get tree frogs around here in Michigan too. But we would get tree frogs, and if the spring kind of got warm slowly, we wouldn't uncover our pool. And there was a particular year that we uncovered the pool, and there were tons of these little tree frog tadpoles. I mean, there were hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them. And so our Joni scooped them out with a strainer, and she scooped them into a big bucket. And one of her friends at Franciscan said, oh, he wanted to put them in his fish tank. And so she's like, fine, whatever, put them in the fish tank. Well, the guy got sick of them. Now, he was in Steubenville. He got sick of them, and he took them into a neighborhood where there was a stream. And so he just figured, well, I'm just going to dump these in the stream. I don't want them to just die. Well, a few months later, her friends who lived around there, they said, oh my gosh, we are overrun with tree frogs this year. We don't even know why. And it turned out it was because they came from our pool, and this guy who Joni knew got sick of them and put them in the stream. So you can really affect the local habitat of something if you do something like that. So again, I just want to point out that I want you to do your homework this week. I posted like a feature page for the with the salamanders and mud puppies, and they are Michigan salamanders and mud puppies. And so on this, in this article, there were nine highlighted species, and I want you to pick, according to the directions, I want you to pick 3 of them, and I want you to write some things about them. And so that proves to me that you read the article. I want you to write it, and I want you to turn it in next week. And I don't want you to skip doing your assignments this semester. I'm calling you on, and I'm going to be contacting your parents if you're not doing your assignments. So let's do them. Let's do them. That's the right thing to do. Okay. So I hope you guys have a great week. I hope that you're in your homes and nice and warm. I want you to study for our dissection next week. Be ready for class, and I hope you have a great week, and I look forward to seeing you. So I am going to go ahead and say goodbye. So, okay. So anyway, guys, I'm going to go ahead and leave the meeting. Like I said, I hope you're doing great. I hope you're nice and warm and nobody got caught in the bad weather here. Okay. God bless you.